Hello and welcome to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. Now, Chris, I know I cut you off before we just started this podcast. Sorry, we were having a little discussion, weren't we? And I cut you off and I said, you know what? This sounds like this conversation can really go places. So why don't we just nip on the StreamYard and do a recording and see what happens, right? So you were about to tell me all about your little meeting with the three little Wiccan pigs. Is that right?
Well, there were more interesting people there than the three Wiccan pigs, but yes, we can talk about those too.
Do you want to talk about the interesting people first? And then maybe on the Patreon, we can talk about the three little Wiccan pigs.
Okay, we can do that.
Because that make you more comfortable, wouldn't it? I should imagine, just in case they're listening.
Well, a couple of podcasts ago, we were talking about how I was going to go, hopefully, do a session with one of my favourite moots. And it's one of my favourite moots because there's such a nice mix of people. Like there's about 15, 20 regulars, but they never all turn up at once. So it's a bit of a pick and mix every week.
Right.
So like you'll get the core, you'll get like 10 people turn up, and it's always a nice little small one. But every week is a different 10, if that makes sense.
Mm.
So what's quite nice is when this week was because there was loads of people there. And I don't know if it's because things are starting to open up again. Restrictions are a bit more lax and stuff now, even though COVID seems to be spiking. So there was loads of people there. And I can't say, obviously, that they were all there to see me, although that may also be a case.
Well, I mean, you were given a talk, weren't you? Or some sort of seminar, or was it formalized training? What was it? They were all gathered to listen to you and drink.
I think it's just because it was a workshop. And I think it attracted some of the beginners in that wouldn't normally come. So they kind of drop in once every now and again, and the beginners don't tend to stick around. And I get it's probably because of that kind of core 20 that come. A lot of them are quite seasoned witches. So like they're in lots of other groups and lead other groups. So this one's quite nice because it's kind of a mix of people that's got a nice blend of completely different practices. I suppose a bit like your open moot, of kind of having a mix of randoms that you wouldn't come together in any other circumstance, and you definitely wouldn't practice together.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice to kind of talk about a concept and then hear 10 people give completely different views.
But they're not necessarily stupid views.
Yeah. Like all completely different, but all completely valid. So it's quite a nice group. But obviously for this one, as we mentioned a couple of podcasts ago, it was going to be one on intro to spellcasting. So because I was aware that people around me are of multiple layers and some of them have been practicing for a really long time, I kind of varied the pitch throughout all of those. So like I'd add some little drawings and stuff. Just suddenly thought, I don't know where the drawing is, Liam. I haven't shown it you, but I did like a pretty version of the thing I was showing you the other week.
One. You showed me the Celtic knot one because there's a couple
I did
of
a pretty version.
Celtic wannabes that go to a lot of these moots, isn't there?
Yeah. So it was quite nice because it kind of meant we were discussing kind of the foundations of spellcasting, which was quite nice. And then you got people like throwing in, because it wasn't like a formal session. It was just kind of like an open talk where you start a discussion and then people pitch in and it goes in whatever direction it goes in. So I was talking for about an hour. And then I'd brought lots of bits and pieces and I told them if they'd looked at the Facebook group, there was a message on there to say like bring things that you want to bring or you feel drawn to throughout the week. And a lot of them had brought random stuff. You know, you got witches that had bought a load of different kinds of barks and was kind of like very woody in all their stuff that they'd brought. And then you've got people that had just bought a handful of crystals. That was their little collection from years kind of thing. And we were just kind of like sharing like the sorts of things we carry around with each other. It was almost like a witches meeting where they all got the contents of their handbag out and went, this is what I carry.
Right, okay.
So it was quite cool.
That's good. So did you have to get up at the front and talk with them all through your triangles then?
So, well, I kind of sat kind of an edge of the circle because it was a weird place to be.
Right.
Because it's like a small pub and like it's split into two rooms. There's like a front room and a back room.
Okay.
So there's like, it's set up for like a main batch of probably only about 10 people. And like I say, there was about 25 of us. So like the room was just full of people. So I just kind of, you know, projected to the room. And went through kind of the fundamental stuff. So, you know, trying to break it down into three, you know, talking about it's not all about intention.
Were there any shocked faces when you said it's not all about intention? Or were they all just nodding along? Did anyone look like, you know, give you that deer in the headlights look?
Well, the only ones giving us that were the ones from the New Pagan Society.
Oh,
we'll talk about that later.
The three little Wiccan pigs that we're going to talk about on the Patreon edition.
So, but there were lots of like reassuring nods, and then there were people throwing stuff out there, and then they were bringing in conversations about things like frequencies, because some of them had mentioned like when it comes to ritual work, because we were trying to expand the point that basic spellcasting in all its kind of basic forms. So what we would call like total beginner magic, that some people seem to think is mastery once they've done a few things. So we were talking about singing bowls and stuff.
God.
And a lot.
Did you bring one?
No, I don't own one, Leo. You know I hate the fucking things.
Well, I mean, people use them for the wrong reasons. I mean, I know it's complete bullshit, but I mean, there are some people that use them for banishing, and I'm pretty sure if someone decided to use their Tibetan singing bowl near you, it would probably work on banishing you, and you're like some all-powerful, you know, multi-dimensional entity, aren't you? So maybe there is some
just the sight of one would have me getting for the door.
That's pretty powerful. I mean, even if a crucifix with the Jesus on can't get rid of you, a Tibetan singing bowl can. So surely there is some magic there in that. So I started this new little segment, which will be out by now, on the tier 2 Patreon, Thoth Witchcraft Patreon, tier 2 and tier 3, because I thought, well, we've tried to break this whole spell casting magic triangle down. There's been videos, there's been podcasts, there's been all sorts of stuff. So I thought, what if I stripped back and thought about, okay, so the person that's never, ever, ever, you know, delved into magic and knows nothing about it, where do they start? I thought I'll put a little 8-segment kind of lecture series, I guess. It's not really a lecture, it's more like a rambling series, which I haven't planned in any way, shape or form. I just know there's going to be 8 of them, because each of the icons you can put together like a puzzle, and they make a big picture. So each of the thumbnails, you see, some people haven't worked that out yet, I'm sure, but each of the thumbnails for each segment, you can put them together and they make a big famous picture. But the whole idea is to go through the series and talk about magic from the very beginner level, like very beginner, from the perspective of like paranormal investigator. I came along because I want to know if spirits, I've exist. I've never cast a spell. I've never read a magical book. I've just watched Most Haunted. You know, those sorts of people. I thought
Yeah.
taking them and seeing how far you can get with them, explaining things, and I give a little bit of homework and advice and stuff at the end of each episode. You know, so anyone that hasn't got access to tier 2 Patreon, you need to upgrade yourself and get on there because you're missing pure gold, I think. But I'm biased because A, I want your monies, and B, I made the series. So, you know, Chris hasn't listened to it yet. But I mean, the very first spell that I talk about is a spell for prostitutes. So, I mean, what's not to like? But anyway, so obviously this is Free Little Wiccan Pigs because we will be talking about the Free Little Wiccan Pigs at some point. But comparing this, because I've got obviously what most people refer to as the open circle moot, which the open circle moot in Bristol is really like a collection of kind of a couple of moots that run on different days. So the open circle moot isn't a specific moot, it's basically a Facebook page or a Facebook group which basically just kind of hosts information about other moots. Now, a lot of the people seem to go to the same ones. So, like Open Circle Moot, the moots that are hosted are the Tuesday night moot, the Wednesday coffee moot, and the moot on the move, where people like wander around and, you know, go around to different occult sites and tours and go foraging and stuff like that. So we've got that in Bristol. The open circle moot, obviously, I like. I've chatted shit about a couple of the other moots around Bristol and Bath and that I've not liked. But what about those ones up your way then? So you said that you like this one. So can you compare and contrast what's good about this one, but that isn't good about the other ones you've attended? And is it just the people, or is it the format and locations and that as well?
I suppose it's kind of like what you're talking about with the open circle moot is it's kind of got the kind of best people from all the local moots. So like some of the ones come over from like the South Birmingham and the Birmingham moots, and then some of them come from like the Dudley moots. And they're basically like the people that don't really, well, some of them are people that don't fit into these other moots, and the main reason for that is because they're so specific. So like the Dudley moot is essentially well, this will make you laugh, is a Wiccan moot that is actually ran, I found out this week, by a hedge witch.
Right.
And you're like, what? A solitary hedge witch? So she's just decided to go with a Wiccan format for the moot, which starts and ends with a blessing.
Oh,
And you
no.
kind of like,
I've been
why
to
would you do that?
before. It's like going to church. It's worse than going to church because at church, sometimes they have free drinks and free food. Whereas if you go into the pub, you've got to pay for it and you've got to do blessings and stuff. I suppose they're just jumping on the Wiccan bandwagon, aren't they? It's like, I don't practice this, nor do I like it, but I know it will pull in the punters, so we'll just call it a Wiccan moot type thing. But
it's always busy.
In this day and age, does it pull in
everybody
the
there
punters?
knows nothing?
I suppose. Oh, so this is the one where there's like no practitioners, and is this the one that they all just go on about like politics and that?
Kinda. It's the one that I went to, and I've been to only once. And they were supposed to have, it was a session on poppets.
Oh yeah, I remember you saying about this, where
And
they
they were
say you can't
supposed,
use it for anything bad or something.
yeah. So originally they were supposed to have this really cool local practitioner who's kind of a hoodoo voodoo mix, kind of slightly Haitian, and owns their own shop, Little Grey Witch, I think it is, like an online shop. And he couldn't be there for some reason, like he had to cancel last minute, but they still did the session on poppets. And obviously this hedge witch had to kind of, and she brought polyester stuffing
Right. Okay.
She actually brought polyester stuffing
Did
to
she
stuff
have
the little poppet.
Birkenstocks?
I couldn't see her from the other side of the table.
It'd be funny if she did, wouldn't it? Be like another one of your friends that you admire.
Oh, fucking Kate West.
Oh.
Don't start me, Liam. Don't start me.
But that some would say that that's what all this podcast is about, winding you up for entertainment purposes. I mean, they do say that this is for entertainment purposes only. That's not a disclaimer. It really is supposed to entertain and astound. I'm sure there are some people that are listening that have never tuned into this before that are completely gobsmacked right now.
Well, probably. But yeah, so I don't like that one. I've never quite made it to the South Birmingham Moot, but again, that's very new agey, and they do some open rituals, and they do like a summer camp, like a pagan camp.
Oh yeah,
where they all
those
go
things
away.
always worry me.
They all go away together and stuff. So like, it's just not my bag. But there are some of the people there that come from that moot, and they're just fantastic. Like, they're some of the best people that I've met locally practicing.
But are
so
they
that's quite
quiet?
nice.
Do they keep it hush hush, or do they actually talk at the moots? Because I find that often the people that are most qualified to give good advice and stuff are the people that keep their mouths shut. And it's normally the idiots that tend to be spouting loads of stuff.
See, I think that's what I like about this moot, though, is that doesn't tend to happen.
Right.
Because of the caliber of the people there, with the exception of last week, obviously, but the caliber of people normally there means that what's said is always interesting, and they don't hold their tongue, because otherwise we'd all be sat in silence because it's such a small group. So it's quite nice because they're all kind of various different blends of kind of heathen, pagan, whatever you want to call them, that have kind of lived through the Wiccan era and don't really think much of it, rather than people newly coming at it.
Yeah.
So they're seasoned witches who have seen the rise and fall of Wicca, kind of thing, and have seen the damage it's done to their to people's practice. So that's why I think I like that particular group. There are some other groups that I quite enjoy in the area, just they're not quite like that. I'd think part of it is because that we meet in this shitty little pub in the middle of nowhere, that's like barely big enough to hold a party, where the beer is shit but it's cheap, and the it's cash only. How many pubs these days are these little granddad pubs where they play darts? Or I actually saw them get out a dominoes board this week.
Oh wow.
And I mean a proper thing that sat on the table, like a full built-up thing. And you've got these ancient guys playing dominoes while we're talking about witchcraft in the next room. What's not to love about that?
I've often thought that the age of kind of moots is dying and waning, because there is something magical about going to some random seedy, creepy place. Like the Tuesday night moot, the coffee moots in a coffee shop. That's fairly accessible and easy. But the Tuesday night moot's literally in a secret room above a pub, and they've changed the door now as well. So it's not even got a glass door or anything in it. It's just what looks like a dodgy cupboard that people just seem to disappear and walk up a flight of stairs. So you don't even necessarily get people randomly walking in to look for the toilet or anything now, because there's this fire door there. But there is something magical about that, in that, you are going out of your way to go and seek out magic or practitioners and magical knowledge and stuff, which used to be, other than getting, rare publications, it used to be the only way you'd really get involved with a magical community close by. Nowadays, we don't need that. We don't use that or see that. And I kind of thought, well, if that's the case, then surely the actual moots, if all of the plebs, as it were, are getting their, fetish kind of itch scratched by being part of these online communities and stuff, and can just buy more and more crystals and new age crap. Surely the real magical practitioners will be going to the in-person secret kind of moots and clubs and stuff. But I think that there's, to a certain extent, I don't know whether that's true or whether it's not true, because they are still going. There's a lot of moots and groups and things that are still going. And at their core, there's a small group of people there that make it happen. And the caliber is normally pretty good as well, but it's the numbers. People often talk about, I know you've said it before, other people that run moots and attend moots have often said, well, we used to get 50 odd people here or 20 odd people here, that kind of thing. And I kind of think,
the Dudley moot that I'm on about, the kind of one that's gone really Wiccan, that used to have 100 people. If you weren't there in the first 10 minutes, you couldn't sit down. And that was 10 years ago.
Are we exchanging quantity for quality though? So is it just that the scum, the uninterested, the ones that are kind of somewhat interested but they don't really want to do anything, are they the people that used to make up the big numbers that are no longer attending because they're going to paranormal investigation nights or something instead? Or is it that people are starting to die off or become disinterested? I don't know. What's your experience up there with all of those moves? Because you've been to enough of them
now. I think there's for here specifically, it's Pagan Federation's fault.
Right.
So Pagan Fed kind of came round and destroyed all the moots about 10, 15 years ago. And that was because it basically kind of took over all of the moots. And they tried to do this kind of central pagan council kind of thing, where they tried to get them all to represent. Then they told them all, if you want to attend, you need to be a member. And basically they all went, fuck you. And they all splintered off into these kind of circles and covens.
Private groups that don't advertise.
Yeah. So you kind of, and if you're not looking for that, and let's face it, most people I've met these days, they're not looking for covens. They're very, it is very much solitary practice these days.
Yeah.
People are quite, they might want to come together for the occasional, for a Sabbath or something, or a festival of some kind, but they're not actually interested in working with others. I made a few comments in my kind of speech last week where I was just saying, there's nothing harder than bringing a group of witches together in order to cast spells. So because you're always going to be limited by your weakest member.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to be carrying those people in that group that aren't at the same caliber, which means that limits what you can and can't do and how far you want to push. But also I'm not even sure how people recruit anymore. Like they used to be, it used to be quite obvious how there were particular groups that you knew were feeding circles. They were kind of training circles for you to find recruits. And I don't even see that anymore. Which is interesting. But
a lot of people don't want to be tied down to a group of people or a coven. So a lot of people want to feel like they're in control. And a lot of the time you do see this both mirrored in TV, film and books and that, with the idea of, well, this is the family, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, that kind of thing. You are in it or you're out of it kind of thing. A lot of people nowadays, they want to be able to move around, as much a, pay as you go type situation, as opposed to a full-on, you're going to sign this contract in your arse type thing. A lot of people dislike that. But it doesn't necessarily stop people from communicating and talking to others and having friendships and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of people dislike people in general, and aren't really people, but I mean, I get benefit from going to the moot, and yeah, there are some times where I kind of think, oh, for fuck's sake, are they just going to talk about Doctor Who for hours upon end? But most of the time, that's only because of a certain one person, you know, at their core, you can just turn to another person and have a conversation, which is good, you know. It's free to a certain extent. It's difficult because I think nowadays we think of everything being formalized. We think, well, I want to learn magic, much like if I learn anything else, I want to enroll on a course, on a curriculum. But moots have never been about that. There's a lot of people I know that have attended because they want to learn something, but no one there is obliged to teach or take you under their wing. You're supposed to give and communicate and talk, and it comes out of the group, the people that are there, interesting conversation and such. You know, you're not guaranteed to have your questions answered necessarily, and a lot of people don't necessarily want to put that kind of work in, you know. But yeah, I mean, I've seen moots kind of fade or get into somewhat difficult situations where you get a lot of uninterested beginners. So there are beginners that come along that they want to throw themselves into it. They're really fascinated, and they go and they're doing their own experiments. They're going and doing their research, that kind of thing. And then you've got the ones which are just kind of like, well, I've got nothing better to do on this one day of the night of the week, you know, so I suppose I should go there, and I'll go there. But, you know, they don't really contribute anything or talk all that much, nor are they particularly interested. You know, those sorts of people, they're fine, like a couple of them, but as soon as that makes up the largest, you know, segment of the types of people that are there, that's when, you know, I think you get into some serious problems. But I mean, it is very strange because, I mean, with people having magical conversations and stuff like that, I still to this day really struggle to understand why people don't do anything. I mean, so many people are interested in hear the stories of other people, but yet they're still, you know, turn up and go to a moot with magical people where they talk about magic and spellcasting and exploration of the magical wonders of the world, this world and other worlds, and yet they still don't feel inspired. Oh yeah, I'm going to go away and do that. You know, they just like go to hear almost like story time. It's like an episode of fucking Goosebumps or something.
Yeah. And like I say, I'll be interested to see whether or not that huge group turn up next time, because there was about kind of, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 of them that were brand new. I'd never seen them before. And you just kind of like, oh, okay, well, these people must be floating around in the Facebook group. But it's not a very active Facebook group.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, is they don't talk about what's going to happen before it happens. So people don't turn up because they don't know what they're going to turn up to. I remember you saying you had similar problems with the Tuesday night lot at one point, didn't you? Where they weren't turning up because they wanted to know what was going on, and rather than just turn up like people that normally want to.
You see, whenever there's like a talk or something like that, it gets a lot more people through the doors because they know kind of roughly what they're getting involved with. So it's for the people that are you know, not very confident. They'll think, oh, there's a talk, I'll go to that. I know it's going to be on this subject. I know I won't have to say or do anything or talk to anyone. I can just go and watch, type thing. And a lot of people, you know, are more comfort in that. In terms of trying to give some structure and stuff like that, I think it can be important. You know, we do book clubs once a month, whereas not so much everyone has to read a book. It's just you bring a book and talk about it, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of involvement with planning, you know, roughly interesting things for people, but people come and go all the time as and when they want, you know, but there has to be at least 2 people to make a moot. So people need to go through the door. That's it for this episode of the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast.